and welcome. You're watching Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now. This is the brand new edition, 11 seasons of empowering India's small businesses. I'm Sunanda Jayasheelan, and on the show today, we are bringing you the LOT Budget Edition in association with Assocham, decoding the impact of Budget 2023 with some of India's sharpest minds. This is the first decoding we're going to be doing for India's small businesses. Let me quickly dive in then and introduce our experts. First up, Sumant Sinha, President Assocham CMD Renew Power. Ajay Singh, Senior Vice President Assocham CMD Spicejet. Vineet Agarwal, Immediate Past President Assocham MD TCI. Rahul Garg, Chairman Direct Tax Council Assocham. And Chirag Baijal, Co-Chair Manufacturing and Capital Goods Council Assocham. He's also the MD of Carrier. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, really talking about Budget Plus. We've heard the budget announcements. We've had just a little bit of time to digest it and what is going to be the impact on different sectors, on entrepreneurs, all of that we're going to discuss. I want to kick this off, though, by talking about one key expectation that is there, especially for India's small businesses, and the expectation for SMEs and MSMEs. We've heard a lot of announcements, especially as far as the credit guarantee scheme is concerned. And so my first question to you is just that. Are you happy as president of Assocham to have heard the announcements that we have for entrepreneurs?
No, look, I am, absolutely. The reason is that, the scheme, the credit guarantee scheme, of up to 2 lakh crores without collateral for MSMEs, I think is a very big positive step forward in the direction of continue to give credit to MSMEs, which of course is so critical. The second thing sort of linked with that is the whole creation of the national registry, and also the fact that now within DigiLockers you can have entities as well. And so that allows the seamless the transfer of information about MSMEs from one lender to another and to multiple lenders. And your Aadhaar is going to now also be a part of finding you in that sense. That's right. Yeah. So your PAN now becomes the single sort of identification mechanism. And so that in some ways allows us, there are many MSMEs out there. I mean, by some counts, 30-40 lakh MSMEs. And the question of identifying them, reaching out to them, to give them credit, to give them information, all of that has always been a very difficult task. Sure. And I think this really goes a long step towards addressing that particular lacuna. And I think along with that, there are a couple of other things for MSMEs as well, which is around when their tax becomes due. And I'm sure Rahul can talk a little bit more about that, which is really about it's now going to be based more on cash flow rather than on invoicing. And so that hopefully will improve the cash flow situation of MSMEs as well. Okay. I want to get your initial thoughts as well, Ajay, and then we can talk sector specific. Just on the face of it, would you say this has been a good budget for India's entrepreneurs?
I think it's an excellent budget for the reason that it's a it's a solid, stable, prudent budget. It's also a growth-oriented budget. It's really a budget for apt for a year in which India assumes the presidency of the G20. Yes. I mean, look at it in any which way. What we are showing to the world is our inflation is down, our growth is up, our infrastructure spending is up, our fiscal deficit is down. This is quite the opposite of what's happening in countries around the world. And we are showing to the world here how India can run successfully its government and its economy and make it the bright spot that everybody expects it to be all around the world. So I think very good budget. The fact that infra spending has been increased from 7.5 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores. The fact that fiscal deficit is under control, it's been pegged at 5.9% for this year. I think in an election year, there's always a temptation to give a lot of freebies and sops and so on and so forth. This government has done quite the reverse and acted in an extremely responsible manner on so many fronts. I think the reduction in individual taxes will certainly help spur demand and increase growth, as will infra spending, and of course a whole host of issues on ease of doing business and the green sector and so many other MSME that Sumant was just pointing out.
Sure.
So I think it's a great budget, and it displays a consistency of policy, which is rare in an election year.
Okay. Rahul, if I can come to you next and really talk about one of the other key expectations that was there ahead of the budget, and that was as far as housing loans were concerned, and some sort of relief really coming on housing loans given the government's massive push towards housing for all. Are you happy on the announcements that we've seen? Also, we were talking offline about the capital gains tax, and are you happy with what you've heard on that?
In the MSME, one is you allow them the funding through the credit guarantee, right? The other is that they are getting the fund from their sales that they make, and sales when they make to the businesses pay them the money.
Okay.
There is now a regulation particularly provided in income tax that those businesses would not get the tax deduction unless they make the payments in time to MSMEs, which means that MSME's cash flow would improve. So that's one important thing. The other thing I would say is we saw that there is a very concerted effort to link the skill development and people development with the industry requirement. And you'd find that MSMEs who are at the grassroots would be benefiting most from the dispersed skill development programs that the government is doing, and therefore that would also improve the MSMEs.
Okay.
So now coming to the point that you
Sure.
raised about the housing loan being no further concession on that, I think that's all right, because the rate of interest on the loans is one major thing in decision making for housing. So long as that remains in a reasonable range, you would say that the housing progress would happen and would not get hampered. Currently, the loan interest deduction which is available is reasonably decent. On the other hand, I would say that a slight setback on taxing the capital gain on house has happened when the capital gain tax exemption on house is capped at 10 crores. So earlier what used to happen, you sell a house, you buy another house, irrespective how much was it, you get the full tax exemption. So today if you sell a house for 200 crores and buy another house for 200 crores, you'll not get the tax
If
exemption
you're
for
buying a
entire
house
thing.
for 200 crores, you definitely don't need any rebates.
I think that's what finance minister thought,
Yeah.
that you don't need the exemption, and therefore they capped it at 10 crores.
Sure.
So that's a little bit of tax burden, I would say, not a setback for the housing sector as such.
Sure. Vineet, my next question is to you, and Ajay made a point saying this has been a consistent and a good budget despite the fact that it's an election year. That being said, do you perhaps have wished to have seen more for the rural economy? I mean, Vineet first, but this is open to all of you on the panel. More by way of boosting just rural consumption, rural demand, more for the rural economy.
Well, I think the consistency part is extremely important, because it not only gives confidence to domestic investors, but also to international investors that
Yeah.
the country is ready for business and for long-term business. It's not, we're not looking at few years, but for a very, very long time to really move the economy into this $5 trillion economy soon. On the rural side, clearly agriculture is at 16% of the GDP today. So it is a large number, and there is a certain, but the number of people involved are much higher, closer to 60%. So there is definitely some need for things to happen at that level. The government has put in a lot of effort. I think some of the earlier part of the FM speech was attributed to a lot of the things that are being planned in the rural area. There's also, I would say, some incentives because it's an election year. But beyond that, I think the fact that the government is cognizant of the kind of subsidy that goes into things like fertilizers, into things like water, I think those are very important, because they are encouraging natural farming, they're encouraging use of biogas, as well as sustainable farming at the rural area. So could more have been done at the rural area? Certainly. I think there is the gap between urban and rural is pretty high. So certainly more efforts to increase the income at that level would always be needed.
Sumant, would you like to respond to that?
No, I agree with Vineet, but before that, I just want to make a point that Ajay was making earlier, which is that, look, I think this is a budget that is really going forward on the same path that the Prime Minister has been espousing so far, which is really the philosophy of building the future India. And that is why there's such a massive allocation of money to infrastructure spends, 10 lakh crores, 33% increase, on top of a similar increase last year. So it's actually doubled infrastructure spend in almost 2 years, which is actually quite phenomenal. So I think the government's philosophy is that, look, you have to create the economy, you have to create you have to invest in growing the economy and reduce friction costs, improve productivity, which is then actually helpful for everybody, for business as well as for increasing the quality of life of the average person. And so I think that is really a strong positive, and of course fiscal consolidation along with that is phenomenal. I think as far as the agricultural side is concerned, I think one of the other things that the FM announced really was the creating of an accelerator for agriculture. So I think there is a bigger thought about how to improve the R&D part of it, the development part of it, the technology aspect of it. Agriculture has been growing at about 4.5% for the last few years, which is, I think, phenomenal. But I think the focus is really on taking that couple of steps forward. Now, I agree with Vineet that, look, given the disparity of incomes, given the level of economic development in rural India, there's always more that can be done. And there is no qualm about that. But I think things like the manufacturing program hopefully creates jobs in rural areas as well. And that hopefully allows more people to move away from the farming sector into manufacturing. All of that is going to be positive in the long run.
Okay. I just want to add one thing on the agriculture part of it. I think it's a very subtly said though, but this whole movement of projecting and branding the millets, which is not only a domestic movement, it's going to become an international movement. And if you look at the millet farming and millet agriculture dynamics, which is very different from the cash crops so far. So now converting the millets into the cash crop through new branding is going to impact a lot. The second thing I would just add is, there is a lot of support that is now available and is going to be available as announced in this budget of the digital infrastructure being available in the supply chain of the agriculture. So whether it is the logistics, whether it is the marketing, whether it is the FPOs, whether it is the value addition, all that is going to be connected. And this pipe, once gets connected, would fuel the agriculture growth and also make it deeper.
I have to take a quick commercial break on that note, but on the other side, we're going to continue this very special LOT budget edition in association with Assocham. Back in just a moment. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. With us here on the LOT budget edition in association with Assocham. Since there's a lot of focus on agri-tech and there's a lot of focus, of course, on research, but for the agri space, do you feel that it's going to affect a very small section of entrepreneurs?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think the whole encouragement is to get more and more people, young people, to start thinking about how to come out with startups in the agri-tech space. And I think we really need more of that to happen, because right now we really need entrepreneurship to broaden out much more into the real economy, into infrastructure, for example, but equally into the agricultural side. Now, with the creation of more and more colleges, R&D centers and so on, can we really broad base the whole issue of entrepreneurship and R&D and tech into the agricultural area? I think there is some, subtle thinking around that is also happening.
Okay. I want to talk PLI, and There were a lot of expectations around PLI, especially around steel and for the steel industry, an increase of budgetary allocation for the steel industry. But PLI, first off, I would love to get your comments that we didn't hear much, one. Two, I know it's been an ask of the MSME and the SME space to lower the caps for PLI to allow them to participate. Would you have perhaps like to have seen something on that?
So before we get to look at PLI, all of that has been spoken. It's all connected with one another. If you look at it, it's like meeting the moment where we are as a country. And why I say that is because look at the logistics costs, for example, coming down with capex. Private capex is catching up now with the public capex, which has been high for the last consistent 3 years. That in a way helps create more jobs. MSMEs, by some data points, is about 8 million numbers registered, and that's the formalization happening through all the digital initiatives. So the capex that was put together for PLI about a year and a half back is yet to come on the ground and start giving results. I would still think the MSMEs are going to benefit with the PLI that's already been announced. Once that PLI gets on the ground and start running all of that sectors, 15, 16 sectors that we've seen. There is an expectation for from the MSME sector for PLI to have more amount of money being allocated. It's probably going to come in due course of time, because look, this is a little unenviable task to manage the social side along with the side of spending more on capex. But it's more to do with the progressive approach. It works like compounding does, consistency over a longer period of time. So in that sense, I think it is all right to have a delay of about a year or two, specifically looking at MSMEs for PLI, but they will anyways become a part of PLI, in my opinion.
Sure. Vineet, you and I have had extensive conversations on PLI for SMEs and MSMEs. Anything you want to add on that?
No, certainly I think there is something that could have come more out of this. We've been asking the government to, for example, think about container manufacturing as an area for PLI, because 95% of all our containers for transportation is actually imported. So, and it's a large number. And if you want to again talk about how we need to standardize logistics in the country, you need containers. And those are, if they're not coming from India, then we are really losing a lot of foreign exchange. So there are lots of areas like what Chirag just mentioned that can get supplemented in the PLI budget.
One other thing, and that is pertaining to the clean energy space, was PLI as far as large-scale, grid-scale battery storage is concerned. And perhaps some announcement on that, which we haven't heard much on. Would you have liked to see more for the clean energy space?
You know, I think that you have to view the clean energy space on the basis of the continuum of policies that the government has been announcing. And there have been a lot of policies for different aspects of the clean economy. I think, for example, the FM talked about the National Hydrogen Mission, which of course was announced earlier but reiterated by the FM in the budget. And then on top of that, there were a number of other things pertaining to the circular economy, pertaining to battery storage, the viability gap funding, projects to be set up in Ladakh, and a pretty significant allocation for that to be given as well. So quite a number of schemes were which were new actually, and I think so far what has been announced really has been around the actual investments of clean energy. I think what was announced today was a little bit more a change of how to really broad base this into a number of other areas. For example, mangrove plantation, the Mishti that the FM was talking about with a smile in her eyes as she said it. It was really about mangrove farming in the coastal areas. So I think a lot of those kinds of things, the Govardhan strategy, policy about waste to gas, those are all new things that were not talked about earlier. So I think it's really a broad basing of creating a sustainable economy, which is really again in sync with the Prime Minister's philosophy of life, lifestyle for the environment. But just a word about the PLI scheme. I think, look, even though the PLI scheme is currently targeted at creating, in some ways, global champions out of India, and therefore scale is important. And that is why even if you look at the allocation of PLI, it's going to few companies. It's not like it's going to 20 companies in the same space. It's going to 3 or 4 companies. So the government's focus is on trying to concentrate, give more incentive, and thereby create larger companies. But I think the way MSMEs will benefit is because a lot of these PLI schemes also have local content requirements. And that can only happen if there's the development of a local ecosystem. And that will happen, that will give opportunities to MSMEs.
If I could just quickly add to that clean energy point. Last budget, there was an allocation done to energy efficiency. There was energy services company market enablement. I think we could have got a little more on that, because one is the clean energy from a generation to a distribution. The other one is actually sustainably urbanizing, making sure energy efficiency is given adequate importance while we are doing it on the generation side. That's something that could have really helped us more.